Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. When we think about courage, our minds usually go straight to those epic charges, massive armies, and glorious victories, right? But what if real courage is actually much quieter and, honestly, a whole lot lonelier? Today, we're unpacking the Stand of Shammah, courage in the lentil field. It's this ancient, unforgettable story tucked away in the book of 2 Samuel about just one guy who finds himself in an absolutely impossible situation.
I want you to literally put yourself right into the middle of the dust and chaos of an ancient battlefield. The adrenaline is absolutely pumping, things are going terribly wrong, a Philistine raid is coming down hard. And suddenly the people around you, your friends, your fellow soldiers, your whole support system, they just start to run. So what do you do when everyone else runs? Look, most people would see this and think, yep, it's over. The rational, everyday choice, just escape.
Which brings us to this incredibly stark contrast. On one side, you've got the Israelite army. And hey, their reaction makes perfect sense, right? Retreat, fear, pure survival instinct. The result is a completely abandoned front line. But then we have Shammah. He remained. Driven by just pure conviction, he stood his ground. Imagine the profound isolation of being literally the only person left who refuses to walk away from those overwhelming odds.
Part 1. The Lentil Field. Now what's really interesting about this slide is that Shammah wasn't out there defending some sparkling palace or a heavily fortified city. He was literally just standing in a seemingly insignificant patch of farmland, a lentil field. But in the ancient world, the literal meaning of that food, it equated to the deeper impact of survival. The stability that farmland provided was the only thing standing between the people and total community vulnerability. Losing this one little field meant severe, devastating vulnerability for his entire community.
And the situation deteriorates so incredibly fast. It's like a domino effect. First, the Philistines gather to raid. Second, the Israelite army instantly retreats. Third, the field is left completely exposed. And fourth, the enemy advances. Boom, just like that. The dust rises, the sound of the enemy gets louder, and every single visible shred of hope is stripped away in seconds.
Part 2. Redefining true courage.
So the crucial point is, we so often misunderstand courage as just the total absence of fear. We kind of think heroes just don't get terrified. But Shammah's story completely shifts that paradigm. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to remain faithful in spite of it. Think about it. Everything in Shammah's environment was screaming, retreat. No backup, no reinforcements, literally no logical reason to stay. But his courage was anchored entirely in his decision to remain faithful to the ground he was given.
And what actually happens to a person when they're completely abandoned like that? Well, in that empty space, one truth becomes crystal clear. Solitude clarifies resolve. Shammah wasn't following orders anymore. He wasn't just riding the momentum of a hyped-up crowd. Without any external validation, his isolation actually clarified what he truly believed was worth defending. Sometimes, clarity only really shows up when the noise disappears and popular opinion just completely fades away.
Which leads us to one of the most powerful lines in this entire ancient text. He took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck down the Philistines. Just notice the sheer weight of that solitary act. He didn't just protect land, he defended what literally everyone else had abandoned. He stood exactly where everyone else had fallen back.
And because he took that stand, we see this incredible principle unfold. Victory emerges from apparent defeat. Just take a second to really absorb that. By holding on to ground that had already been entirely surrendered by a whole army, Shammah turned a completely lost cause into an absolute triumph. What looked like total abandonment became the exact stage for a massive breakthrough.
Part 3. The Partnership of Victory. Let's move to and see how this builds into the intersection of human determination and divine intervention.
The passage wraps up with this simple but huge phrase, "And the Lord brought about a great victory." Now this doesn't diminish Shammah's role at all. Actually, it completes it. He didn't wait around for ideal conditions. He wasn't waiting for the army to come back. He acted in perfectly imperfect conditions with totally unwavering commitment. And his courage? That became the exact point where divine strength met human resolve. He did what he could. He stood and he fought. And what he couldn't do alone was completed far beyond his own natural abilities.
And at the end of the day, it all came down to a single number, one. One single person who refused to walk away. The difference between the total loss of a community's survival and a massive, great victory was determined by just one person. One guy who decided that what sustains life is worth defending, regardless of what the rest of the crowd is doing. Crazy, right? Part 4. Defending your field.
And this brilliantly illustrates how an ancient story translates directly into our everyday routines. I mean, we aren't out there fighting in literal battlefields or guarding actual plots of lentils, but look at our modern lentil fields. They're the abandoned responsibilities. They're the compromised values that society or our peers just give up on. They're those inconvenient commitments people walk away from the second things get tough. The lentil field is just this incredibly powerful metaphor for our own uncelebrated but absolutely vital duties.
So when you're standing in one of those modern lentil fields and you see everyone else taking the easy way out, you are inevitably going to face this question. If everyone else is leaving, why should I stay? It's a very real temptation. The natural human instinct to say, well, no one else cares, so why on earth should I? But Shammah's story challenges that exact instinct head-on. It reminds us that the presence of others is absolutely not what determines the value of your stand.
So, what is the value of this stand? Well, first, we learned that not all retreats are wise. Sure, sometimes stepping back is strategic, but, discernment is required to know when stepping back actually means surrendering something vital. Second, what sustains life, whether that's your family, your integrity, your core commitments, is always worth defending, even if it looks like an insignificant field of lentils to someone else. And finally, significance is measured by faithfulness, not recognition. Shammah wasn't fighting for a medal, guys. He was fighting because the field mattered.
And that is the lasting testimony to the power of persistence in the face of complete abandonment. Courage means standing firm when everyone else is leaving. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to come with a round of applause. Sometimes it just looks like a single figure standing in an empty field, holding ground that others have already surrendered.
So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What field are you being asked to stand in? Where in your life are you being tempted to retreat just because everyone else is packed up and gone home? Remember, outcomes aren't always determined by numbers. Sometimes they're determined by pure resolve. Identify your field and remain faithful to it, because sometimes the only difference between a devastating loss and a great victory is just you. If this explainer challenged or encouraged you today, make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into these powerful truths. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.